Tonight, for my primetime special, Operation Summer Heat. Across America, violent crime and drug trafficking are testing the limits of law enforcement. Federal agents are striking back. I sit down with FBI Director Kash Patel to go behind the headlines and reveal the strategy, the stakes, and the stories driving this mission. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show, where our guest for the full hour is the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, who, under his leadership, the Bureau launched Operation Summer Heat with local and federal partners, targeting the most violent offenders in Chicago, St. Louis, Memphis, and New Orleans and beyond. And for viewers new to it, set the table for this operation, Mr. Director, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Armstrong. As I said, this is breaking news. We've kept it quiet for the summer. Operation Summer Heat was a 3-month surge by the FBI with our state and local partners. We started at the end of June, and we just wrapped up at the end of September. And what we did was follow one theme: crushing violent crime, one of this administration's key priorities. And we went into every single field office. We had 55 field offices scattered across the country. And today, we're going to unveil the results of Operation Summer Heat and what law enforcement can do when you let good cops be cops.
What is it that you find that all these cities have in common that is lacking, where it takes an operation like Summer Heat to go in and disrupt this crime, make sure the partners have the resources that they need, and make sure that these criminals understand that their days of destroying and controlling communities and placing people in fear are over?
Well, I think a quick historical analysis is important here. You have to recognize that there was an explosion in violent crime, and it didn't happen in a month or 6 months. It happened over the course of years due to the prior administration's lackadaisical approach against crime, and violent criminals took advantage of that. So the FBI, under my leadership, we came in and said, okay, violent crime's exploding. Everybody knows that. We see that. You can't walk around these cities anymore. People are getting shot. Kids are getting shot. Drugs are killing our youth. We need to do what the FBI is best at and crush violent crime. So we targeted all the major cities in the country. We called our state and local authorities, and we said, we need you all in as task force officers. You have the ground level intelligence. We have to attack the criminal enterprises where they start and their entire spider web of networks across the country. And that's the beauty of Summer Heat. We went everywhere.
You know, what is fascinating, what you're insinuating here, is that this is not possible unless all the strategic partners are on board. It's a collaboration between the states, their leadership, the mayors, the municipalities. Why is that so important, and why does that give you the kind of effectiveness in terms of the results that you're seeking through Operation Summer Heat?
Because there is no one federal agency or the federal government that can account for the safety of the entirety of the nation without our state and local law enforcement partners. You have to recognize the 1 million or so state and local law enforcement partners across our 50 states doing the job. They have the best relationships in the community. They have the ground level intelligence. They also have assets and resources that when we sync together with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that is the most dynamic police force on God's green earth. And that's what the beauty of moving agents out of DC, as you and I have talked about at other times. When you take 1,000 folks out of DC and put them into the field, they are supporting Operation Summer Heat on a permanent basis with state and local law enforcement, because there's less people in DC for the FBI and more intel analysts in the field, more federal agents in the field, and more support staff in the field. That's what it takes to build up these cases. That's what people don't realize. You can't just walk into a city and say, okay, there's 150 law enforcement officers here, let's go arrest people. You have to build a ground game of intelligence that takes months. That's what we did in Memphis. That's what we did in Chicago. That's what we did in New Orleans. And that's why at President Trump's direction, we went in quietly months ago into these cities to set phase 01. Now we're going in with the Guard to complete that project. And that's the beauty of operations like Summer Heat.
When you say going in with the Guard, I assume you're speaking of the National Guard. What role will they play? And have you, through your involvement in lowering crime dramatically in Washington, D.C., found the process and a formula to better use the National Guard to complement what you're already doing?
We absolutely have. Under President Trump's leadership, we needed the National Guard in Washington, D.C. You and I both know. We live here. Washington, D.C. was a hotbed of criminal activity. I mean, we had an assassination of Jewish students and interns. We had an intern from Congress get murdered. We've had so much drug crimes here. So rightfully so, President Trump sent this in quietly months ago to, again, set the stage. The FBI take 01 operations, phase 01, set the ground game intelligence, work with MPD. But in order to complete the mission, the president was right. We needed a National Guard to set a stable perimeter. That is the criticality of what the National Guard brings to this fight. We don't need them being law enforcement officers, and they're not. I want to make that crystal clear. What they allow law enforcement to do, the FBI, the interagency, state and local authorities, is to work safely within the city street corners to operate and conduct investigations, to bust into houses, to take bad guys off the streets, to seize firearms and guns. And so they don't have to worry that the next house over has another gang activity in it that might attack them, because we didn't know about it. And that's the beauty of having National Guard. And they're going to be setting up these perimeters in all these other cities, thanks to the president.
Walk us through your Operation Summer Heat chart here. What are we looking at?
So as I was saying, Summer Heat was all 55 field offices across America. And while we can't give you all of every single 55 field office's stats, I just wanted you to look at some of these here. In 3 months, Armstrong, Summer Heat had 8,700 arrests. In 3 months, Summer Heat had 2,281 firearms seized permanently off our streets. 3 months, fentanyl, 421 kilograms. By the way, that's enough to kill over 50 million Americans. Cocaine, 50 million. On the low end, that's a conservative estimate. Lethal doses off that seizure. 45,000 kilograms of cocaine. We conducted operations that led us to 2,000 indictments and 1,400 convictions. And the bulk of that work came from our violent crime and gang forces. I want to highlight that because that was the focus of Summer Heat. 6,500 of this casework came specifically out of that. And here's something that's not on this chart. Operation Summer Heat found and located almost 1,000 child victims and returned them to safety. Victims of sexual trafficking, victims of home abuse, victims of rape and violent crimes against children, all of it.
That is shocking. What about, how does Operation Viper fit into what we're looking at here?
No, that's a great question. So in order to execute Operation Summer Heat across the board successfully, we had to surge into certain cities that had just a spike in violent crime. For instance, Memphis, New Orleans, and elsewhere, because they had the largest per capita homicide and robbery and violent crime rates in the country. What they needed was FBI specialized resources. They needed our teams to come in there with our cell phone analysis, our CAS systems, our VICAR systems, our specialized investigative tools that allow us to map out the infrastructure that the enemy is operating in, to locate them, and to work with state and local law enforcement officers to say, now we got search warrants to kick down these doors because we know where the bad guys are. Operation Viper was a critical component to supplement Operation Summer Heat. This is just what the FBI is good at doing. When you let good cops be cops. And the only thing we have focused on, me and the deputy, when we've become in charge of the FBI, is removing the bureaucracy and putting the cops out into the field. And that's what our federal agents are doing. These, by the way, I didn't mention it, these are record-breaking results for any 7-month period ever at the FBI. At a bare minimum, all these arrests, convictions, and seizures are up 20 to 40% from the same time last year.
Let's dig into the details here. I mean, let's take a look at the firearms seized. We assume those firearms are seized from criminals, people that would do harm to these communities. And when you think about the fentanyl, 50 million people, and the cocaine, what does it do in the long run for a community and its safety and the overall just dramatically reduction in criminal activity across the board?
You raise a great point. What you can't see on this chart is things like what we did in Anchorage, Alaska, and things like we did down in Louisiana, where we not only found the criminals, we seized permanently an entire hotel in Anchorage, Alaska that was the epicenter of gang and criminal activity for narco trafficking, and we took it. And the same thing on a fraud scheme down in New Orleans and southeastern America, southeastern USA, we seized 6 different mansions of a healthcare fraud scheme, seized permanently off the streets, off the market. So the critical element that we need for summer heat to sustain itself is sustainment. We have to leave a footprint in these cities of security. And that's what we're doing with summer heat by not only taking all this off the streets and seizing the assets that were the hotbeds of criminal activities, but now the criminals know they can't go in there because the second they step in there, they're getting arrested and added to these statistics.
You know, I'm certain for someone watching this broadcast and they're looking at the cities that you've selected for Operation Summer Heat, I'm sure there's an outcry. How do you go to other cities? How do you spread this across the vast United States, where you have this very similar, this uptick in crime and how it devastates these communities?
Well, the great news for those that are watching is that we're already there. As I said, the FBI has...
In every city, every major city, you're already there.
And summer heat was... These are just the highest record numbers of arrests. These are only the cities: New York 471, LA 441, Boston 404. Those are just the top 8. We have stats for every single city. This is what was the contributions for every single city. We have 345 resident agent offices throughout America. And what we've done is partnered with the Department of Justice and our great Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General to bring prosecutions, because that's what you need. You need indictments. These indictments are across the country in every single state. As I mentioned, Alaska, that people would probably forget about. We're everywhere and we're staying. And that's the beauty about the redeployment of our resources at the FBI from Washington, D.C. Because when I first got here on the job, I found out 1/3 of our workforce worked in the NCR, the National Capital Region. 1/3 of our 37,000 personnel workforce. And I said, that's unacceptable because 1/3 of the crime doesn't happen in Washington, D.C. and the NCR. So we pushed them out. That's why Americans know and are seeing the FBI out there in full force, because they're literally out there in numbers they've never been.
So let me bring this closer to home. I see Baltimore, where David and I own the Baltimore Sun. You have 224. There's always talk about the increase of crime in Baltimore. How do we get crime down? The mayor and the governor doesn't want the National Guard in Baltimore. How do you, something like this enhances, helping to reduce the crime, petty theft, the homicide in our neighbor Baltimore?
Well, look, the political leadership in Baltimore needs to recognize what the president did here. He asked us to go in quietly months ago because of the criminal rise in places like Baltimore. We don't see politics in crime, but we are going to leverage the full authorities under this presidency to go in there and do what we did in Baltimore. 224 violent arrests in 3 months. That's not in 7 months. That's in 3 months. And when people reject...
And there must be an emphasis on what you're saying, violent arrests.
Violent. These aren't misdemeanors. Yeah. They're Mickey Mouse operations. Guns, narco trafficking, people who do harm to our children, who entrap them, who enslave them, who traffic them. This is the worst of the worst. Murders, gangs. That's why I highlighted that violent crime and gang statistic. 6,500 of these arrests were just violent crime and gang related alone. And so when people come back at us and say, oh, well, we don't want the National Guard. Well, just look at what happened here in Washington, D.C. The National Guard came in and set up safe perimeters and zones and also allowed the public to view safely what the National Guard was doing, which was simply setting up perimeters. And that's what we can do in places like Baltimore if they want to work with us and get the job done. And who doesn't want a safer town for their child to go to the parks in? Who doesn't want a town with more guns removed from the streets? Who doesn't want a town with more fentanyl seized so your kid doesn't overdose at the park? That doesn't make any sense to me for anyone arguing against it.
The director of the FBI is our guest, Kash Patel. We'll talk about more about Operation Summer Heat on the other side of the break. I'm Armstrong Williams. We'll be back.
It's ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Do you have the fire to go further?
You know, your critics say that Operation Summer Heat retasked the FBI towards street crime, well, at the expense of counterintelligence and domestic terrorism. Was this a surge or a pivot of priorities?
It was a recognition of the explosion of violent crime while staying on mission to defend the homeland. As you walk around this building, you'll see the top two priorities of this bureau is to defend the homeland and crush violent crime. We could do both of those things at the same time, and that's what we're doing. And for those that don't understand the numbers or want to attack you politically, let me just put these numbers in front of you. Counterintelligence arrests, year to date alone, 7-month period since I took over. Counterintelligence arrests against the PRC, Iran, and the Russians are up 60%, 85%, and 35% respectively. That doesn't happen if you come off the counterintelligence mission in national security.
65, 35, and 85?
That's correct.
Wow.
And those facts speak for themselves. And just to put an umbrella over it, Armstrong, this year alone, the FBI has had 24,000 arrests of violent offenders. 24,000 violent arrests. Year to date from last year, that is a 125% increase. So if we're not doing our job and we're not finding the bad guys, then we must be making up a lot of numbers.
So if we go from Operation to summer heat, what will be the winter version of this as we're going into the winter?
Maybe we'll call it frostbite.
Frostbite.
But that's the key. We have to sustain for the American people. We have to show the longevity of the program. And the way we do that is by highlighting what the FBI has done outside of summer heat. So while all of this is going on, Armstrong, the FBI has arrested this year 4 of its top 10 most wanted fugitives in the world. 4 in 7 months. To put that in perspective, the prior administration got 4 in 4 years. That includes Cindy Singh in the state of Texas, who murdered her mentally disabled 6-year-old son and fled to India. No one wanted to look for her. We found her in 2 months thanks to the Indian government and our partners in the interagency. On top of all that, we got the Abbey Gate bomber in 2 weeks. The Biden administration could have looked for him for 4 years. We got him in 2 weeks. He's sitting in a jail right now.
What is the difference, though?
We remove the red tape and we get after the mission. As the president has instructed us, protecting the homeland is the priority of this administration and the people.
I want to pivot on that because you mentioned how quickly you apprehend these criminals. I want to go back to Charlie Kirk and how quickly you were able to apprehend the assassin. What is fascinating about this is this conspiratorial thinking. No matter what happens, there's got to be another assassin.
Mm-hmm.
They did not protect the evidence. Obviously, there was a conspiracy, and are they going to arrest someone else? Is that fair? How do we get ourselves caught up in that? And why can't we just accept the fact that Tyler Robinson was a lone wolf?
The simple answer, in my opinion, is social media is wildly out of control, and there's too much clickbait in this country. And one of the things I highlighted to Congress in my testimony last week was if we want to protect our youth, we got to get more involved in social media and online platforms because that's where the folks, the assassins of this world get radicalized. That's where they're the lone wolf actors in general. And so we have to get after that problem set. And I asked for Congress' help in doing so. But speaking of Charlie Kirk, who was a very dear friend of mine, and then I was tasked with leading the nationwide manhunt to find the perpetrators involved. Of course, we were going to use every resource we have to find every single person involved. And the investigation's still ongoing. But we, as one of the pillars of my leadership here at the FBI, is transparency. We've produced more documents to Congress than my last 2 predecessors combined by 2-fold. Just to put it in perspective. So when we take our investigations out to the streets, I have the same ethos. And this is how we got Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin, so fast. We flew out to Utah. We landed on the ground. I said, I want the video analysis. I want it stripped and broken down so that we can feed out to the American public who this person is, because we didn't know yet. I want enhanced images, and we held a press conference at my direction, and we put the videos out, and we put the images out. The suspect was in custody 2 hours later. In 33 hours from the time Charlie was shot to the time we put handcuffs on him and had him in custody. And to put that in perspective, the Boston Marathon bomber, which happened in downtown Boston during the Boston Marathon, took 5 days, and there was a police officer who was killed in that manhunt. Luigi Mangione, who allegedly murdered an individual, the CEO of the healthcare company, in downtown Manhattan in broad daylight, took 5 days to find him.
So, but I don't want to put words in the mouth of the director. You don't assume, and I know you can't really answer this, that there will be more arrests with the Kirk investigation?
What I can assure the American public is, A, the state of Utah is prosecuting this case, and they have a great team out there. And B, the FBI is the leading federal investigative authority we will leave no stone unturned. We are serving legal process to scores of individuals and companies. We are interviewing scores of witnesses that were on the ground and in the area that day. And wherever they might rest around this world, if they had a tether to the Charlie Kirk assassination, they are going to be tracked down. And if they were involved, we are going to recommend charges to the appropriate authorities. Our investigation is very much ongoing. But we've also, Armstrong, in an unusual thing, put out publicly more information as to what we found because it is of such public importance. The flip side of that is the social media people get involved and they come run with their crazy conspiracy theories because it makes them money. It gives them clickbait. And I don't work for them and I don't respond to them. My duty is to the American people. If there was anyone else involved in Charlie Kirk's murder, you can look at our record. We'll find them and we'll get them.
You know, speaking of social media, they're up in arms over George Soros and Open Rose as to whether or not his Open Rose Foundation is supporting terrorist organizations that are anti-America and goes against the better interests of our nation.
So organizations, I can't speak to that directly.
George Soros.
And because I can't comment on whether or not we have an actual investigation. But
okay, that's fair.
Speaking to matters like Antifa, for example, right? And the new EO that the president signed and their designations giving us authorities that we never had. What we are able to do is the one thing I've done my entire career under investigations: follow the money, serve legal process and follow the money. These groups just don't show up overnight. You don't have hundreds of people surround a courthouse overnight and then move down to LA and cause riots and then move halfway across the country and cause disruptions in Chicago and elsewhere. It is an organized effort that someone or some groups are paying for. And what I can tell the American people is we have open investigations on multiple groups and individuals funding these efforts. We have legal process that has already been executed. The search warrant results are coming in, but also remind the American people that they want, or not they, the American public for the most part understands that it takes time to develop these complicated investigations. But in the days of social media and the 24/7 news cycle, people want immediacy. And if you abide by that requirement, then you will fail in your investigative duties.
Let me give you two scenarios of recent. There was just a UK killing in Manchester, England, where they were celebrating Yom Kippur, and someone died. Just in Germany, in the last 48 hours, they apprehended 3 suspects that were bent on killing Jews. They confiscated AK-47s, which leads me to this point. Is the FBI, Mr. Director, up to the task of penetrating domestic terrorist groups? And why do we have to wait for someone to die before we make an arrest? In Germany, they made an arrest before someone died. In the UK, they did not.
I can't speak for the UK and Germany,
but are we up for the task here?
We absolutely are. And the American public across the country sees it. We defeat and disrupt these acts before they happen. We did it in places like Louisiana. We did it where we have an ongoing operation and takedown happening this week. We've got other places where we have stopped these crimes in Texas and elsewhere from happening because of our domestic terrorism authorities, because of our international terrorism authorities. We have covert online employees, we have undercovers penetrating these systems, and more importantly, we have individuals who are accessing these group chats, working for us or as a source with us, who are penetrating the nodes and allowing us to use the intelligence authorities that the FBI has, partnering with our intelligence community to seize and suspend and disrupt these operations before they happen. And most of the time, the American public doesn't hear about those. But when we can bring an arrest, we're very public and we're very loud about those because we want the American public to know we are disrupting. We're doing it all the time. And in fact, we just disrupted a school shooting in New York City just a week and a half ago. We put it out there. The NTOC, the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, received a tip from a social media company. This is how it works. We've got relationships. They tell us, hey, this kid was going to go shoot up a school in New York City. You know what we did? We immediately acted, executed search warrants, found the kid with a firearm in the school, and stopped the school shooting.
But can you arrest those on social media that have manifestos talking about killing, assassinating, creating havoc?
So in terms of arrest, when you talk about killing and assassinating, that's violence. Yeah. That's not protected speech. Yeah, we're going after those guys. Absolutely. We have to protect First Amendment protected speech. But at the same time, when you threaten humans, when you threaten groups, when you threaten communities, you bet the FBI is coming after you.
You know, do you have the resources? You know, I was just reading where effective October 1st, many of your agents, hundreds of them, decided to take the compensation to move on.
Mm-hmm.
You lost hundreds of agents. Some people would see that as the FBI lacking resources, and certainly that is the narrative in much of the media. How does that impact the FBI? Does it cripple you, or do you have the necessary resources to do all the things that you're talking about today?
We do. We have, thankfully, recruitment since we took over has exploded. We have doubled record highs of my prior two predecessors in terms of recruiting intel analysts, federal law enforcement agents, and other staff through the FBI. So increasing that amount of throughput and putting them through places like Quantico and Redstone, our training facilities, and getting them out.
But you're losing experience.
Of course. After 9/11, that crowd now is entering that period of window, 20 to 25 years of service, where that's when they retired. We were always expected that to happen. But what the American people needs to recognize
Hold that point on about what the American people need to recognize, because I don't want to interrupt it. We're going to a break. The director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation is, I guess, what is this room?
The Webster Room.
This is the Webster Room. Oh, after the former director.
In honor of his recent passing.
Yes, that's right. We'll be back.
It's ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Do you have the fire to go further?
Welcome back to the broadcast. The American people should know.
The American people should know how we're doing in recruitment. And we're not just bringing in new folks off the street. We're bringing in seasoned, experienced professionals through our programs like our Crossover 1811 program, because other federal agents want to work for the FBI. So we're not just bringing in newbies. We're bringing in people from the private sector that have been working for 10 and 15 years that want to work at this FBI. And what the American people should also know is if there's a complaint about how we are staffed and manned now, where was that complaint in the last 10 years? Because it's not like the FBI didn't have the funds or resources to fill the billets that were open on the books for the last 7 to 10 years. Leadership chose not to. That is an abject abdication of duty to the men and women of the FBI. And when we removed these billets because they remained unfunded, because prior leadership was too lazy or didn't care about the future of the FBI, the American people need to know that we are taking the opposite approach.
How are you impacted by the government shutdown, especially if it's long and protracted? How will that impact your mission?
So the beauty of the FBI is that the men and women put this mission first and foremost. And we are accepted from the overall shutdown because of the national security and law enforcement mission that we have.
So do they still get their pay?
Well, that's the problem. That's the biggest problem. They work, they don't get their pay now.
Until this is resolved.
Until it's resolved, they'll get their full back pay. But you have to recognize.
Can someone work with the same enthusiasm, knowing that members of Congress are still getting paid and all other non-essentially essential employees are not getting paid? So can they still do their job at the same level?
It's my job to motivate them to do so, but here's the thing I've learned. I don't really need to motivate them. They've come in with an enthusiasm from the field office visits I've done throughout the country in my 7 months that people who have been here for decades have told me they haven't seen or had. They said they have now been able to do what they signed up to do at the FBI because the red tape's gone and we're letting them be good cops. So I think the enthusiasm's there, and that speaks to the president's leadership and our leadership here at the FBI.
Which brings us to this. What is the most significant counterintelligence threat facing our country domestically, in your opinion, right now, from what you see every day?
The PRC.
Explain.
So the Chinese, and particularly the CCP, engage in the greatest level of espionage against the United States of America. And particularly troubling is how they acquire lands and real estate in and around military bases. Particularly troubling, as you have now known, is public Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon, where there's penetration of our telecommunication infrastructure. Particularly troubling is how the Chinese are going after our critical infrastructure systems, our water, our energy, and our electrical grid infrastructure systems. We know they've penetrated them. We, the FBI, have been able to produce in record numbers, as I highlighted earlier, counterintelligence arrests of this espionage activity. But we need a whole of government approach. We need to work with the interagency, and we need to get out there and harden our infrastructure, work with mainland China and the PRC, as I've asked them to do, on shutting down not just fentanyl precursors, which are killing Americans in record numbers, but also on their espionage activity. And other nations are doing the same, just not at the same level, to include the Iranians and the Russians and DPRK.
Let's bring this home. James Comey, a former director of the FBI, is being accused of lying to Congress on 2 counts.
Mm-hmm.
There are agents who testified that Mr. Comey did use a source inside the FBI to leak information to the press. There are agents who are still in this building that were loyal to him, who did not want to see this indictment go forward. The Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, just announced that not only are they going to bring the full charges against Mr. Comey, that is only the beginning of people that they're targeting in the same manner. Your thoughts or where you sit as the current FBI director, seeing one of your colleagues who also was the director of this place being indicted. And what does this mean going forward for the FBI in the Trump White House?
This is the only thing we haven't talked about. It's the restoration of trust the American public has in the FBI. Don't take my statistics for it. You know it. It was cratering. It was at all-time lows over the prior 2 directors. The restoration of trust comes in my work with Congress, congressional oversight, production of documents, and transparency. That's a piece of it. That's a big piece of it. When we produced 33,000 pages and the prior 2 directors only produced 4 and 13,000 respectively. That's a big difference of investigations of consequence, everything from JFK to the Charlie Kirk assassination and everything in between. We're making ongoing productions like never before seen so the American people can see, touch, and feel it and not be told what happened. As to, for me particularly, an individual who is a victim of a weaponized system of law enforcement, a politicization of law enforcement, literally had subpoenas served on me for no legal basis whatsoever. I will never, in this seat, launch an investigation without the appropriate legal and factual basis to do so, and I do not make those decisions. The career
in other words, whereas the people that accuse you of weaponizing the FBI to do the president's bidding is just not true.
No, what America should do is look at the people that made those accusations and ask themselves the one simple question that the majority of the media doesn't want to face. Did Russiagate happen?
No.
And what happened? What did I uncover when I led that investigation, when I was a chief investigator on Capitol Hill, is that a political party hired a foreign intelligence asset to make up information, then get it to the FBI. And the FBI knew and has now admitted it knew the information was false and the source was bad. Even so, they went to a federal secret court, applied for a warrant on their political opponent, and lied to that federal court to obtain that warrant. If you can't come to terms with that, then you have no opinion or basis to stand on to attack our integrity and the leadership I have at the FBI. Look at the individuals that did that. Ask yourself the tough question in the mirror, not you, the fake news media. I want to prop these people up and say we're the ones weaponizing government. It is the height of hypocrisy to have someone accuse us of doing that when they are the ones that created that maniacal system to satisfy their own egos. They're just pissed that we figured it out, and the guy that figured it out is now the director of the FBI, and the attorney general is a great partner, and she's right. We're just warming up.
How do you balance your attorney general got a lot of pushback when it seems as though that they were threatened to punish free speech? Even people on the right became very concerned about what is the bar, because it's even if the speech that you hate is what separates America from everyone else. How do you balance all this against?
Look, it's simple. We will defend your right for free speech to the maximum extent of the law. If that free speech turns into violent activity, you will be arrested. That's it. That's the difference. You can have hateful speech that I don't agree with or you don't agree with, and you and I see it all the time. We're victims of it all the time. But that doesn't make it a violation of the law. And that's how we balance it. We don't make it personal. We never take it personal. And the men and women here at the FBI who run these cases and adjudicate these decisions, and the intel analysts and the support staff that come into work every day, they know that. I see it. I feel it every day. I walk around this building. I meet the folks that are doing it, and I engage with them at a personal level. Something I'm told my prior predecessors didn't do, because I want them to have a connection to leadership and the mission that we are leading, which is a mission-first approach to defend the homeland and crush violent crime and bring record-breaking transparency to the FBI.
You know, we know the Senate hearings is a kangaroo court. It's political theater. And obviously, you're human too.
Yep.
And you push back, obviously. They accuse you of being the most dangerous person to the mission of the FBI. From those confirmation hearings, if you could do things differently, would you? Or what is it would you like to clarify on the record that the Democrats and their agenda accused you of?
I wouldn't do a single thing differently. I would just ask the media to ask their audience, why is it that the people that continue to attack me can't understand the basic fact that we have proven that they weaponize law enforcement? And do you want to know why they call me Dangerous Armstrong? Because I am, to their fabricated, weaponized system of government. And we are going to bring down the entire disease temple. And they know that I know what happened. And so their best line of attack is to get the fake news to make personal assaults onto me. And here's how I know, more than anything else, that I'm over the target. The louder they are, the more they scream, the more they don't have a factual point to levy against me. I know I'm doing my job, and I'm not going anywhere.
I want to come to January 6th. It is intriguing that 250 FBI plainclothes agents were inside the Capitol on January 6th. I saw the president's tweet to get to the bottom of it. Who placed them there? What were they doing? Were they inciting violence? What can you tell us, Mr. Director?
This is a great example of the president's initiative to solve all the answers on January 6th. And it's another example of our transparency efforts. Pursuant to the president, we investigated the matter and found out why FBI agents were placed there in the first place. And it turns out we found documentation and witnesses and whistleblowers that said we were forced to go there to do riot control. Armstrong, do you know what the FBI does not do ever? Riot control. We don't do that. So the prior leadership sent 250 some odd men and women into a situation they're not trained for, put them in harm's way, put the individuals out there in harm's way. And also, those individuals have collectively responded or said beforehand that they were forced to go there. They didn't volunteer to do that.
And you believe it?
That's their word, not mine. That's what they reported. That's what they wrote down at the time of and stated. And we made those productions of Congress, which is the only reason you know it, because I'm the only director that's willing to work with Congress to get this information out there. And so I think we are in a better position than we have ever been in terms of transparency because of President Trump's initiative to be that way, but also to fully investigate matters of great public importance like January 6th. And we're going to continue on all of those matters while we execute the mission of safeguarding this country. And that's the thing I want people to take away the most. If you focus on one thing, that was a knock at Congress. How are you doing the other thing? Because the FBI does double duty all day long. They do triple duty all day long. That's how good they are. And when you let them do the work and not hover over them and micromanage them, they're out there doing this. Summer Heat, Viper. They're doing Operation Not Forgotten, things we haven't even talked about. Tribal land law enforcement in record numbers, seeking and finding international terrorists in numbers that we've never seen before. This is what they're doing all day long. In Congress, or at least some of the people in Congress, don't want to hear about the successes of this FBI because they're the ones that participated in building a corrupt FBI.
The director of the FBI, Kash Patel, is our guest. We'll be back with some final thoughts. I'm Armstrong Williams. Don't go away.
It's ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Do you have the fire to go further?
Some Republicans, Mr. Director, argue that Nancy Pelosi staged January 6th and the Select Committee covered it up. Based on what you personally know, what are the verifiable events in the lead ups? And do you, I know you don't speculate, you just deal with facts.
I'm in a unique position. Remember, I was chief of staff for the Department of Defense on January 6th. We were responsible for the deployment of the National Guard. And what I was forced to testify to years ago at great personal cost has now once again, just like Russiagate, been proven true because all I do is speak the truth. On January, actually in the days before January 6th, we were in the Oval Office where the President Trump at the time, authorized, pursuant to law, up to 10 to 20,000 National Guard. We took that authorization because the law's second part required a request from who? Nancy Pelosi and the Metropolitan Police and the mayor at the time. And what did they say? No. And remember what happened for the next 2 years? They say, oh, Cash is lying, Trump's lying. And what do we find? Letters of their declination of the National Guard, refusing to have the National Guard show up. So all I can speak to is the facts. And the facts are those plus this. Nancy Pelosi and her team were busy filming a movie on January 6th while this so-called chaos around her was going down. If she had, just look at it this way, if she had said yes to the National Guard and we had 10,000 uniformed military officers established a secure perimeter, do you think January 6th would have gone differently? President Trump saw and proactively acted, and Nancy Pelosi and the local government shut us down, and now that is abundantly clear. I did the same in Russiagate. I proved the truth. I spoke the truth, and I did it on January 6th, and now look where we are. Everybody's now saying, oh, you guys were right again.
You know, you've advocated aggressive action against violent extremists. What's your red line, Mr. Director, that prevents the state from drifting into, let's say, policing ideology? And also give us a recent case where government crossed that line.
So I'm so glad you brought this up because I totally forgot about it. It's one of the most important things we do. We call it nihilistic violent extremism. And the main network that does this is called 764. And what they do is they go online, and not just in America, this is a scattered group throughout the world that goes online and targets our youth. And what they literally do is cause and convince members of our youth to be radicalized. They cause them to self-inflict mutilation on themselves. And in some cases, they even cause the kids to kill themselves. And so what I ask state and local authorities across this country when I travel is, I need your help. We, the FBI, have a 300% increase this year alone in arrest for nihilistic violent extremism. Just us. But the recognition and the training we need to bring to the rest of the country is something that we are keenly focused on. But I don't think we missed the mark. I don't think folks overreach, at least for the FBI, in those disastrous situations where the parents aren't able to police where their kids are going out. This is why I tell you social media and these gaming platforms are wildly out of control. Nobody's on there. Nobody knows what they're doing.
Should there be penalties for media that publish leaks that later prove false?
Yes.
And harmful?
100%.
100%. Financial penalty?
I think there should be the same measure of accountability as if anyone else did it. Now, that's up to Congress to decide how to do and add additional penalties. But I think what the American public is owed the least, which is where I have some control, is who was responsible for the leaks. And I have probably 2 or 3 dozen leak investigations going right now where journalists leak classified information, possess national defense information, and again, put out false information for the purposes of weaponizing and politicizing their
I want to come to personal toll for you in terms of what did your defamation battle cost you financially, professionally, and at home? And would you advise others to litigate or just ignore?
So I'm blessed to have an amazing family and network. And besides God, they're the only ones that I care what they care about. And so I'm great there. And in terms of my defamation cases, we've won some. We're still litigating the rest. And for those that see what we've done and the trail we've established, I encourage you to stand up and fight for yourself. Because if you allow these organizations and people online to make up information about you and attack you personally, then they win. And as anyone knows me as well as you do, I don't bend the knee. And I ain't about to start now.
You know, should the U.S. formally designate the domestic groups as terrorist organization? If not, what's, Mr. Director, the right to RICO, material support analogs, or case-by-case prosecutions that avoid criminalizing an ideology?
Yes, I think Antifa, specifically speaking, as an example, we have to recognize these groups for what they are. If we as a society just allow these riots to continue, then we as a society are going to be engulfed by the criminal activity these people are doing. LA, you can't attack law enforcement. You can't throw rocks and boulders at law enforcement. You can't in DC assault law enforcement. In Portland, you can't set fire to a federal building and get away with it. How is that acceptable? And it's all being caused. It's not individual acts of violence. It is organized anarchy and chaos. And thanks to the president's initiatives, and when I was there in the Oval Office when he signed it, we are getting after the fight with more resources and tools than we've ever had.
You know, I found it interesting that your latest on the Anti-Defamation League, political fronts masquerading as watchdogs.
Yeah. I mean, just go look at the glossary index of what they used to have as what they called the equivalent of terrorist organizations. Turning Point USA on the list. Just to name one example.
So you thought they were a useful tool for former director James Comey?
No, I didn't. Absolutely not. I don't know why he ever partnered with them, except to bandy his name about in the public and work with the lobbyists down on K Street. Let me tell you something about this. When word got out that I was about to kick the ADL out, do you know who called this building? The lobbyists for ADL, begging for a phone call. And I said, no. That's how I knew they were in the wrong the entire time. And we proved it. And we put it out for the world to see.
What has surprised you the most when you arrived here?
I think a couple things. One, I was really surprised at how handcuffed our 1811s, our brick agents, were in the field. How many levels of permissions they needed to do their basic day-to-day
bureaucracy
job, and how much bureaucracy just they had to shoulder. So we eliminated it. The other thing I was shocked is nobody planned for the longevity of this place. We're sitting in a building that's 60 years old, and people have been trying to move out for 20 years. We broke through the politics. We're moving next year to the Reagan building. By the way, we're saving the taxpayers $4 billion in that move.
But you're definitely not going to Maryland.
No. And we're saving the taxpayers all that money. And also, we're giving this workforce a safe environment to work in. Why didn't anyone think about that for 20 years? What about the infrastructure? What about the AI? What about tech? Why isn't that here in a system across the board? So the great thing is, with our private public sector engagements, we're doing it. We're doing it. It's not patchwork. We're bringing in new ideas and innovative ways to triage data with AI. We're building an infrastructure system and a cyber system that allows the FBI to talk to everybody at one time. Nobody planned for that because it was not the sexy thing to do and it didn't get them headlines, but that's what we're doing.
You know, being the director of the FBI is a big deal. You know, I watch a lot of crime shows like Forensic, Without a Trace. They always talk about the FBI crime labs in Quantico. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the uniqueness of the FBI crime labs, forensic, the things that they do that nobody else can do better.
Sure. When a case or a crime happens, let's use the Charlie Kirk assassination, for example. The FBI's crime lab in Quantico, we also have a huge facility in Redstone Arsenal that does brilliant explosive training and cyberkinetic training and amazing systems that we're involving our state and local partners with. We flew out there. We used our air assets on a rotating basis to bring the gun, the towel, the screwdriver, and the ammo back to our facilities here for immediate DNA analysis. And what do we have? Positive hits. And what do? We put that out publicly so that we could tell the American people what we're doing. That's just one small example of what the FBI lab does. DNA analysis, chemical analysis, explosives analysis. Our men and women in the lab there would literally impress you beyond maybe anything else the FBI does, because without them, we couldn't do this job. And the training center we built down in Redstone Arsenal, Alabama is something you should come down and see. It is a magnificent feature of advanced training of where this FBI should be going and where we're taking them. Because while Quantico is awesome, it's not enough to meet the throughput requirements I need for the 1811 demand that the American public must have. And so we're getting creative, and you're going to see some fun hybrid options going forward.
You know, it goes without saying the gratitude that we at Armstrong Williams Show had for sitting down with you and giving us this exclusive. In the minute that we have left, your critics who say your educational and experience journey did not qualify you to be in this role as the head of the FBI, what do you say to them? What you bring that is so unique, and why this is the time and place for you in your career?
That's the best example of disinformation I've ever seen. I served in government for 16 years. Democrats fought to delete that from history. I was a public defender. I was a federal public defender. I was a national security prosecutor for the Department of Justice in the Obama administration, chasing down terrorists around the world. I was a civilian at Joint Special Operation Command, embedded with SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force, doing collaborative global targeting of high-value targets. I went to Congress and led the most consequential investigation exposing the largest weaponization of government in U.S. history in Russiagate. Then I went to the White House and ran counterterrorism for an entire White House and country. Then I became the Deputy Director of National Intelligence. Then I became the Chief of Staff to the Department of Defense. I oversaw our DOD at the time and our intelligence community and its 16 agencies. If that doesn't qualify you to be the FBI director, I don't know what does. But the fact that they're knocking me and they're trying to delete it from history tells me that I'm more qualified than anyone before was in this seat.
Mr. Director, Kash Patel, thank you so much for joining me.
Armstrong, thanks for coming to HQ here. Appreciate it.